Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. This is message 3 of 4 regarding the influential field around human beings. If you haven't heard 1 and 2, especially number 1, it might be a mystery of what we speak of, why we speak of it. The first, it is education, to let you know that like the animals of the planet, there is a sixth sense, and you do have it as human beings, and it has to do with survival. Hard to pin down by science, but psychologists know it exists, and it shows itself constantly, and we've told you the examples of how it works. But the reasoning of why we display it and talk about it is because it is starting to shift. Whereas all life has it to some degree, the evolving humanity of a consciousness that becomes higher can now begin not only to understand it, but to use it. This influential field goes 2 ways, and we have said it before. Things can influence you and do constantly. And also, the other way is you can put things into the field with your consciousness that would influence others. Now, it sounds a lot like control. And dear ones, it has been used for control. And the ones who've used it in the past know how fear can control groups of people. And seemingly, it spreads. We said it before. Fear is the primary one. It's actually a survival instinct. But it's often used against you, and can be, by those who would manipulate you and make you afraid. We've also told you in past channels that fear can paralyze you from moving forward in any way with your spirituality or even a higher consciousness thinking. But that's the primal. Yesterday we talked about the ones that are not primal, the ones that are starting to be seen as a wonderful kind of infectious information or atmosphere of consciousness that you can place in these grids, if you want to call it, in these fields, if you want to call it. You see, they're quantum. Yet then we can used, if you want to say that, to enhance those around you, humanity in general. And it's not about using them as much as becoming them. And what we say is this: a high consciousness humanity, a high consciousness human being is always that which is seen immediately as good. We've said this before, and now we'll enhance it. The masters who walked the earth knew of this influential field. And when they walked around, their consciousness was pure love. And in that consciousness and that field, people stopped and stared. As they would move through villages, people would put down whatever they were doing and simply follow them. Have you ever thought about that? That they carried a quantum field that was so big, it didn't matter how far a person was. People came from a long way just to be with them without even knowing why. We're told that even the animals might sit at their feet. What were the animals feeling? You see, they have an influential field as well. Human beings would go and sit and listen and be soothed and satisfied. Dear ones, this is the third attribute we wish to speak of, and it is love. You might say, well, how could that be a primal instinct? It is. It really is. It's just not used. Mother, I said it before. What was the consciousness? What happened to your heart when you looked at your infant for the first time and it opens its eyes and looked at you? Do you remember? Write it down. What was the reaction? You say, I can't write it down. There are no words to describe that emotion and that feeling. I'll tell you that both of you felt it. The love of a mother goes into the field of an infant. That infant becomes an adult, never forgets it. Never forgets it. That is how influential it is. The teaching of a woman to a child is a field of influence where the child learns it and listens and knows. The influence of love is one of the greatest influences in all humanity. More than joy. And you know I'm right. And it goes far beyond just one person or one child or one mother. Think of the love that you would have for an animal. Question, does the animal feel it? Is the animal influenced by your love? Every single one of you who have loved an animal knows the answer is yes. Is the animal then capable of sensing that which you project in your field of influence? And the answer is, oh yes. Those of you who have had animals have seen these things misused as well, where their field of influence might be trained and they're afraid of humans because of what has happened. This is a field of influence. This is not simple biology. Those who would say, well, something happens enough times and they will then change. It is more than that. Love is an influential, powerful tool for human to human. You sat in a movie, perhaps. It's a love story. And in this love story, you'll find that two humans are perhaps kept apart, or one misunderstands the other, or something happens, but you realize they're both very much in love with the other one. They never say it, they can't, and it's withheld until a certain moment in the film when they both realize they feel the same. And you've sat through an hour or an hour and a half of them being apart and wishing they wouldn't be. And here it comes, the first time when they will touch. And they're looking in each other's eyes and realize that it's mutual. And the tears will start, and the women will cry, and the men will pretend that they're not affected. What's going on there? The storyteller and the ones on the screen have included you in the influence of love. Do you see this? It goes beyond a psychological response, dear ones. When two people fall in love, it's a mystery. Even to psychologists, why the chemistry of the body goes haywire at the moment. And it does. And they go into altered states and forget things and do odd things and say unusual things because they're in love. The chemistry of the body is responding to the influence of a grand event of the heart. It's more than simply the brain or psychology. Love is one of the strongest influences that a human can have, project, or feel. And I just told you that it changes chemistry. What if you felt love from another group of people? If you had lack of self-worth and suddenly you were forced into a group and you didn't want to go and you realized they weren't going to hurt you, they were going to love you, it would change you, it would change your body, it would change your structure, it would change your life. What if one culture of humanity suddenly wakes up to say, I really love them. I love the way they work and the way they project themselves. And suddenly you have cultures loving each other. Do you think that would change the planet? That is a field of influence. Let me tell you something. The Star Mothers came from a planet of love, where it was so strong and ruled so strongly and forcefully that the planet had an influence on other planets. That is where it can go. That's how big it is. Can you imagine that? My partner was in India, and he had an experience, and with this I'll close. It was hot and uncomfortable, and he'll tell you so. They'd been out in the sun, they'd been walking, they'd been touring, they'd been seeing. Much to see there in India. But he wasn't really ready for what happened next. He and his touring group found solace in a Sikh temple. And they walked into that temple after they had taken off their shoes, and they sat down, and they realized the temple had one person in it. A Sikh who was in charge, who was a master, perhaps more than a master, who had studied that which was his philosophy of balance and love all his life. And he was then in charge of being there to set the template for the temple. One man. And I will tell you this, that my partner and all of the touring groups sat down and did not want to get up. They did not want to get up because they felt so comfortable and so satisfied and so loved in that moment, not by the one man, but the all that is. It's the same feeling of why those follow the masters. It was a field of influence that was created not just by the temple, but by the one man who was in charge. Is such a thing possible that you could change people with what you put into your field? That you could open your eyes and see not criticism but love for every single human being that you look at, no matter who they are or what they represent or what you have in common or not in common or the issues you've had. But you can see that in their soul is the love of God, of Spirit, of the Creator, that you have in common with them, no matter what your differences. And this would be your attitude wherever you walked. And if it was, you'd be a master. That's how influential love is. It is the third of the influential attributes that I wanted to cover. It would seem to be the absolute strongest, and it is. But number 4 coming up is the one you don't expect. Is it strong? Yes. But more than that, it's life-saving. It's functional. And it's part of your evolution that's coming. I'll be back. And so it is.